A small pony that no one wanted to bid on was being auctioned, but an old man with a white beard saw its potential and decisively bid 1 guinea. He thought no one would compete for a weak pony, but unexpectedly, his rival deliberately raised the bid. The older man didn't back down and kept bidding quickly. This pony, initially valued at 1 guinea, was bid up to 10 guineas. The man then called out a high price of 11 guineas. Paying such a high price for a skinny horse seemed foolish. His rival hesitated for a moment, but with so many people watching, he couldn't back down. He was scared off by just 11 guineas. He would be laughed at in the future, so he decisively shouted a sky-high price of 25 guineas. His friend quickly advised him to give up, but emboldened by the alcohol, he astonishingly shouted 30 guineas. The rival immediately smirked, tipped his hat in mock respect to the fool. This horse was worth at most 10 guineas. The uncle, realizing his mistake, deeply regretted it. His wife had asked him to buy a strong horse for plowing, but in a moment of impulse, he bought a purebred skinny horse. How would he explain this when he got home? But the old man could never have imagined that the legendary story of this horse was just beginning. When the wife found out that he had spent all their savings out of spite to buy a skinny horse, she was so angry that she almost fainted. She ordered him to return the horse and get the money back, even if he had to beg on his knees. However, their son was very fond of the horse and insisted on keeping it. It turned out that the horse belonged to their neighbor, and the son, Bert, had watched it grow up from birth through the fence. The young horse often came over to interact with him. Bert assured his mother that he would train the horse to plow the field and help the family earn money. Seeing the stubborn father and son, the mother reluctantly agreed, but set a 1-month deadline. If the horse couldn't plow by then, it would have to be sold, as the family needed money to live. The next day, Bert began training the horse. However, this horse was quite wild and not as easy to handle as Bert had imagined. It wouldn't even take a bite of the food in his hand. Fortunately, Bert didn't get discouraged. Instead, he turned his back and slowly approached the horse. Without the pressure of a face-to-face encounter, the horse finally accepted the food. Bert took this opportunity to gently stroke its neck and named it Joey. They then went to the hillside to start the real training. Bert told it to stay still, and surprisingly, it only took 2 tries to understand the command. Next, Bert whistled from a distance, trying to call it over. At first, Joey didn't understand, so Bert walked over and patiently explained. Then he ran to a distance and whistled again. This time, Joey understood and ran towards Bert. The friends watching were amazed by the horse's intelligence. From then on, no matter where Bert was, as soon as the whistle blew, Joey would excitedly run over. Even if he was hiding in a tree, Joey could find the exact spot without fail. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed, and Bert hadn't trained Joey to plow the field. It was now rent collection season. Bert's father's nemesis was their landlord. Faced with the demand for rent, his father could only pay half and promised to cultivate the wasteland to cover the rest. Since the landlord lost face last time when buying a horse, he held a grudge and refused to grant an extension. He even mocked, saying that the wasteland was full of stones and that manual cultivation was unrealistic. "You don't plan to plow the land with that skinny horse worth 30 guineas, do you?" Father, out of spite, insisted on using that horse to cultivate the land. The landlord made a bet with him. If the horse could plow the field, he would show mercy. Otherwise, the whole family would have to pack up and leave. The humiliated father angrily approached the horse, ready to forcibly harness Joey with farming tools. However, this action frightened Joey, who kicked the father to the ground. Enraged, the father turned to grab a shotgun, intending to shoot the disobedient animal. But Bert blocked the gun with his body, promising his father that he would teach Joey to plow the field. The father finally came to his senses, but Joey was still very resistant to having a collar around his neck. Helpless, Bert had to put it on himself to demonstrate that it wasn't dangerous. Finally, with Bert's patient guidance, Joey obediently put on the farming tool. They then arrived at a rocky wasteland. Despite Bert's commands, Joey remained motionless. The landlord came over to mock him for overestimating himself. Helpless, Bert raised his whip and struck. Joey, in pain, started running, dragging Bert for dozens of meters before stopping. This scene delighted the landlord, who continued to loudly mock them. Nearby villagers, hearing the commotion, gathered to watch the spectacle. Seeing all this, the mother felt deeply ashamed and hid in her room, knitting to escape it all. Fortunately, Bert outside still refused to give up. After several hours of struggle, Joey finally learned to plow. But the rocky wasteland was extremely hard, making it difficult to cultivate. Joey was so exhausted that his hooves trembled, yet he still couldn't break the ground. At this moment, it suddenly started to rain heavily. The crowd watching the commotion began to disperse. The landlord gave the father an ultimatum: "You have 1 day to pack up and leave." However, this rain brought Bert a turning point. The water-soaked land became soft, making it perfect for cultivation. So he quickly ran to Joey and encouraged him to start running. Joey seemed to realize that he was the only hope for the family. He started running desperately. The plow he was pulling finally dug into the soil, like a battleship cutting through the waves. At this moment, a large rock blocked the way. Bert quickly called for Joey to stop. Unexpectedly, the awakened Joey unleashed a tremendous force and split the rock in half. Hearing the commotion, the neighbors returned to watch the horse's unique tenacity. Only the landlord seemed displeased. He sarcastically remarked to Bert's mother, I would never let my child plow in the rain." In response, Bert's mother pointed her knitting needle at his face and retorted, "If you keep telling me how to raise my son, or how to handle my plow, my horse, my field, or my farm, you might end up with a poke die." The landlord, after being scolded, fled in embarrassment. The father watched the man and horse moving through the rain, his face filled with pride and concern. After the rain cleared, the wasteland was finally cultivated into fertile land. Bert was exhausted and collapsed on the ground, while Joey's skin was chafed and bleeding. The mother prepared to disinfect him with strong alcohol. Bert, smelling the alcohol, immediately started complaining about his father. In his memories, his father was always either drinking or on his way to drink. This is why their family ended up in such a state. Hearing this, his mother took out a few medals and a military flag. It turned out that his father was once a decorated cavalryman. However, he did not take pride in killing. After the war, he threw away his medals, but his mother secretly picked them up. His drinking was a way to escape the memories of killing, as only numbing his nerves could keep the nightmares at bay. After explaining, his mother handed the flag to Bert. Bert then gained a deeper understanding of his father, and even a bit of admiration for the man he had always looked down upon. Since they truly cultivated the wasteland, the landlord kept his promise and allowed Bert's family to defer the rent. In the days that followed, the father patiently planted radishes in the field, while Bert spent his days riding Joey across the vast farm. Under Bert's careful care, Joey not only grew stronger but also ran faster than the landlord's son's car, earning the admiration of the girls in the car. Unfortunately, Joey never learned to hurdle. When he encountered a raised pile of stones, he made an abrupt stop, flinging Bert a mile away. We thought the peaceful days would last forever, but a sudden storm shattered this tranquility. The nearly harvested radishes were completely destroyed, turning all our efforts into nothing. The family was once again shrouded in darkness. At this time, World War I had just begun, and Britain and Germany had officially declared war. The army urgently needed war horses. Forced by circumstances, Bert's father sold Joey at a high price to a captain while Bert was not at home. By the time Bert arrived, the deal was already done. He pleaded with the captain not to take Joey away, saying he feared nothing and was willing to enlist to fight alongside Joey, despite not being of enlistment age. The captain flatly refused him, but promised to take good care of Joey. "If we survive the battlefield, I will personally return him." Despite his reluctance, Albert had to agree. The horns of war have sounded. People lined the streets to bid farewell to the departing soldiers. Bert suddenly rushed out and walked to Joey's side, tying his father's military flag around him. He vowed, "No matter where you are, I will find you and bring you home." And thus, Joey's legendary journey officially began. On his first day at the camp, Joey was challenged by the major, who mocked him as just a pretty face unfit for the cavalry. The captain disagreed and proposed a sprint race. The major readily accepted. The major's mount, Blackthorn, was the fastest horse in the camp. As the race began, Blackthorn quickly took the lead, with Joey close behind. The other horses were left far behind. As Joey started to fall back, the captain encouraged him, saying he could do it. Joey seemed to understand and suddenly accelerated, not only catching up to Blackthorn but winning the race by half a horse length. The major genuinely acknowledged Joey, and Blackthorn also showed goodwill towards him. The two horses became close friends. They built a strong friendship in just one game. To reassure Bert, the captain not only wrote him a letter but also included a hand-drawn portrait of the handsome Joey. A month later, the British and French forces successfully joined and prepared to intercept the German army within France. On this day, scouts reported that a German infantry battalion was camping in an open area. The major decided to launch a surprise attack to catch them off guard. Before the march, the captain tied Bert's father's flag to Joey's saddle. Then, they followed the main force, hiding in dense grass. When the time was right, they swiftly charged out of the tall grass. By the time the Germans heard the thunderous charge, the cavalry regiment was already upon them, with war horses galloping and swords drawn. Like an unstoppable thunderstorm, the German soldiers, who hadn't even put on their pants, were driven into the forest. But unexpectedly, the battlefield situation reversed instantly. What was thought to be a surprise attack turned out to be a trap to lure the enemy in for annihilation. The Germans had already set up machine guns at the forest's edge. As gunfire erupted, the cavalry regiment was almost entirely wiped out. Only the major and a few soldiers survived, but they became prisoners of the Germans. Everyone else, including the captain, fell on the battlefield. Joey braved the battlefield, but was surrounded by German troops. Blackthorn, who also survived by luck, broke free from the soldiers and came to Joey's side. Since the German forces were fully mechanized, the commander decided to put down all the horses. However, a young soldier who loved horses managed to save them by claiming they were needed to transport the wounded. But the untamed Blackthorn refused to wear the harness, knowing it would be killed if it didn't comply. Just then, Joey came over and demonstrated how to wear it, showing that it wouldn't harm him. Surprisingly, after Joey's demonstration, Blackthorn obediently put on the harness. The soldier gazed at Joey with amazement and admiration. Such an intelligent warhorse was truly rare. Meanwhile, far away in England, Bert received a letter from the captain. Upon learning that the captain had died in battle, he was stunned, as this meant Joey's fate was now uncertain. However, the bond between the man and the horse was far from over. Soon, the German army was heading to the front lines. The young soldier responsible for transporting the wounded was to stay behind, but his 14-year-old brother was to go to the battlefield. Before enlisting, the young soldier had promised their mother that he would bring his brother home alive. So, on the way to the front lines, the young soldier rode Blackthorn and led Joey, quickly pulling his brother onto the horse and deserting. The brothers galloped until nightfall, finally finding refuge in a windmill on a farm. They dreamed of returning home after the war ended, but that night, the German soldiers caught up with them. The piercing sound of gunfire shattered the night, and the two young lives were lost in a foreign land. In the end, the young soldier couldn't fulfill his promise to their mother. But Joey and Blackthorn were lucky to survive. The next morning, a little girl found two fine horses. From that day on, she became their new owner. She not only feeds Joey carefully every day, but also sometimes teaches him to jump hurdles. However, despite her demonstrations and food temptations, Joey refuses to jump over the fence. Meanwhile, Grandpa watches them play from the window, his smile as radiant as the morning sun. That day, the girl insisted on proving to her grandfather that Joey could learn to hurdle. She even brought a small ladder to climb onto Joey's back. Her grandfather, worried she might fall and hurt herself, quickly stepped in to stop her. Just then, a German army unit arrived. The grandfather hurriedly told his granddaughter to hide the two horses. These soldiers, like bandits, looted everything in sight, even taking unfinished jam. The officer arrogantly declared, "We'll be back in a few months." Fortunately, the two horses were not discovered. After the soldiers left, the girl felt deeply disappointed in her grandfather's cowardice. Her parents had been killed by the Germans, and today, facing the Germans again, her grandfather showed no reaction. She thought her grandfather was just a coward, but Grandpa told her that bravery comes in many forms. Like the homing pigeons released on the front lines, they must cross the battlefield, carrying endless pain and fear under their wings. They can only look forward to return home. Grandpa's bravery was in accepting the loss of loved ones and using his own feathers to protect his young granddaughter. Soon, the girl celebrated her 18th birthday. Her grandfather gave her a saddle that once belonged to her mother, fulfilling her long-held wish to ride a horse. The girl happily rode away on Joey. Watching her disappear into the distance, her grandfather called out to her anxiously, but there was no response for a long time. At this moment, Blackthorn suddenly became restless and broke free from the reins to follow. When Grandpa finally reached the top of the hill, he found the girl surrounded by German soldiers. It turned out that the Germans wanted to requisition the two horses. Grandpa pleaded with them to leave Joey, the girl's favorite horse, but the officer coldly replied that war takes everything from everyone, including you. And so, Joey and Blackthorn were taken back to the army. But this time, they were to be used to pull heavy artillery. The extreme strain had already killed many horses. Whenever a horse collapsed under the weight, the officer would unhesitatingly end its life with a single shot. The piercing gunshot terrified all the horses, but the officer remained expressionless and immediately ordered Blackthorn to take over. The soldier in charge of care said that this good horse had a severe leg injury and would surely die if it pulled the heavy artillery. But the officer replied that one should not have compassion for things destined to be lost. Even human lives are worthless on the battlefield. Moreover, it was an animal that couldn't understand human language. But Joey, as if he understood, suddenly broke free and ran ahead, volunteering to pull the heavy cannon. Watching Blackthorn leave safely, Joey looked back with red eyes, seemingly bidding farewell to his only friend. With the reins on, Joey began his work, but the heavy cannon made it hard for him to breathe, and his hooves trembled uncontrollably. When the cannon was finally pulled to the top of the hill, humans enslave all creatures of the world, only to kill each other for profit. It is now 1918, and World War I has entered its fourth year, signaling the war's end. The British and Germans are engaged in a massive trench battle at the Somme River. Now of age, Bert has joined the army and is stationed at the front lines being bombarded by the Germans. He always remembers his promise to Joey. "No matter where you are, I will find you and bring you home." This is the closest he has been to Joey in 4 years. The German army continuously bombarded the British positions. The sound of artillery was deafening, and smoke filled the air. Shells fell into the trenches, instantly causing casualties. After the shelling, the infantry from both sides engaged. A soldier asked Bert to put his valuables in a bucket, saying he could retrieve them if he survived. Bert initially placed Joey's portrait inside, but eventually took it back and held it close, as he wanted to fight alongside Joey. As the military band played, the soldiers charged forward with a thunderous roar. On the brutal battlefield, there were no deserters, only one life after another falling, and the longing eyes of those left behind. Bert closely followed the landlord's son, who had joined the army with him, but during the transfer, the landlord's son was shot and fell. Bert hurriedly brought him to a hidden ditch. Although they didn't get along well usually, at this moment, they were brothers sharing life and death. After settling the landlord's son, Bert continued forward. Soon, he reached the enemy's machine gun nest. Bert quickly threw a grenade, creating a gap in their firepower. But when he rushed into the trench, he found it empty, with only dead soldiers wearing gas masks. After a thorough investigation, Bert and the soldiers who arrived later let their guard down. Unexpectedly, the enemy launched a gas attack, leaving Bert's fate uncertain. On the other side, the German troops were retreating in an orderly manner. Blackthorn already had a severe leg injury, and the prolonged fatigue made it utterly exhausted. The soldier who loved the horse wanted it to rest for a while, but it collapsed and never got up again. This time, Joey couldn't save his companion. However, Death might have been a relief for Blackthorn because it finally escaped the hellish torment the British army suddenly pursued. Joey stood in front of Blackthorn, unwilling to leave. The German soldiers ignored Joey and retreated to the rear positions. Sensing danger, Joey kept nudging Blackthorn with his front hooves, trying to wake it up and escape together. But the British tanks were already approaching, crushing Blackthorn's body, and then moving towards Joey. A startled Joey wanted to escape, but found himself at a dead end. Joey raised his front hooves, seemingly threatening the tank to stop. However, the cold-blooded steel machine didn't halt. Cornered, Joey suddenly leaped over the massive tank. Despite never having jumped hurdles before, Joey learned in the face of imminent death. Miraculously escaping, Joey sprinted towards freedom and the vast open world. Suddenly, a shell landed nearby, startling Joey, who fell into a trench. He continued running through the trench, found an exit, and returned to the battlefield. He kept running desperately but got caught in barbed wire set up by humans. Despite the pain from the barbed wire, he kept dragging the wooden stake until it got stuck, and he was thrown heavily into the mud, entangled in layers of barbed wire, unable to move. The next morning, the fighting temporarily ceased. In the trench, a soldier spotted a horse that could still move. He tried to call it over. Others followed suit and made sounds. The German soldiers on the other side, hearing the commotion, also whistled to call Joey. Despite the brutality of war, the light of humanity can still shine through the darkness and illuminate each other's hearts. They used melodious whistles and heartfelt calls to try to awaken the trapped war horse's spirit. Hearing the calls, Joey indeed moved. It was then that everyone realized it was trapped in barbed wire. If left alone, it won't survive for long. At this moment, the British soldier who first spotted Joey raised a white flag. The German soldiers saw this and didn't shoot, allowing him to approach Joey. However, he came too hastily and forgot to bring tools. Just when he didn't know what to do, a German soldier suddenly appeared behind him.
Thanks.
On the battlefield, enemies meeting would typically result in a deadly fight. But at this moment, they reached a temporary truce for a common goal. They seriously discussed how to cut in a way that would minimize harm to Joey. They concluded that cutting from both sides simultaneously would avoid injuring Joey's eyes. Unfortunately, they only had one tool. So, the German soldier shouted behind him, "We need more pliers." A bunch of pliers were thrown over. The two then carefully rescued Joey while sharing their moments of finding joy in the trenches, like close colleagues. Without the war, they might have truly become friends. After half an hour of effort, Joey finally stood up again, but a new problem arose. Joey was trapped between the two armies' positions, and there was a dispute over whether he belonged to the Germans or the British. The German soldier suggested they could fight for the horse, with the winner taking it. But the British soldier feared this might start another war, so he proposed flipping a coin instead. In the end, the British soldier won Joey. After a brief moment of warmth, the two must quickly return to their respective camps, as the war will resume in half an hour. Before parting, they shake hands amicably, and the German soldier gives the pliers to the other as a keepsake. Then the soldier takes Joey back to the aid station. They asked the military doctor to treat it, but after examining Joey's wound, the doctor suggested euthanizing it. The injury was so severe that the chances of recovery were minimal. Rather than letting it suffer, it would be kinder to end its pain. Just as the bullet was being loaded, a familiar whistle suddenly sounded. Joey couldn't help but look up, but didn't see the whistler. Joey's head was straightened again, but the familiar whistle sounded once more. Joey was certain that the whistler was Bert. A path opened up in the crowd, and everyone's eyes turned to Bert, who was feeling his way forward. He had miraculously survived the gas attack, but was temporarily blinded. When he heard that a miraculous war horse had been rescued by the army, he had a vague feeling it was Joey, the horse he had been searching for. With a soldier's reminder, Bert whistled again, and Joey excitedly ran towards him. Even after 4 years, Joey had never forgotten that sound, and Bert fulfilled his promise by finding Joey. But the military doctor still believed it was a stray horse, thinking its response to the whistle was just a coincidence. However, the blindfolded Bert confidently described Joey's features, for white hooves and a diamond-shaped white mark on its forehead. But the doctor glanced over and saw no white hooves. At this moment, the soldier who saved Joey became anxious. He explained that it was because the hooves were too dirty and brought a bucket of clean water. As the mud on Joey's hooves was washed away, for white hooves were revealed. The military doctor, somewhat incredulous, took a cloth from his pocket, wet it, and wiped Joey's forehead. A white diamond-shaped mark appeared before his eyes. Everyone was deeply moved by the horse's legendary journey. The army doctor also promised to do everything possible to treat Joey like a soldier. 3 months later, the war finally ended. At this point, Bert's eyes had already healed, and Joey was also recovering very well. He thought he could take Joey home, but the general told him that only officers could keep their horses, while all other horses would be auctioned off. Faced with an unchangeable order, Bert could only lead Joey out of the stable. To his surprise, comrades had gathered outside. Hearing Joey was to be auctioned, they pooled together £29 for Bert. He hoped to use the money to buy Joey back. But when he confidently arrived at the market, a butcher was determined to get Joey. No matter how much Bert offered, the butcher raised the bid by a pound without hesitation. In this fierce bidding war, Joey's offer skyrocketed from the initial £4 to £30. Bert, short on money, didn't dare to bid again. But just then, another familiar voice suddenly appeared, and their bid shocked everyone. Not only that, if someone wants to raise the price, he wouldn't hesitate to sell his clothes and his several acres of farmland. This man is the farm girl's grandfather. He heard the story of the legendary warhorse and guessed it must be the one his granddaughter liked. So, he traveled for 3 days and nights to get here and spent £100 to buy it. It was his granddaughter's favorite when she was alive, and now it's the only memory of her. So when Bert said he would gather £200 to buy Joey back after returning to England, the grandfather refused without hesitation. But as Grandpa was about to leave with Joey, Joey suddenly broke free and returned to Bert. Although Bert was reluctant to part with Joey, they had both survived the war and found each other. Their bond no longer needs constant companionship to be proven. At this moment, Grandpa also witnessed this touching scene and was moved by the bond between the man and the horse. After comforting Joey, Bert handed him back to Grandpa. But then Grandpa suddenly took out a flag and tentatively asked if he recognized it. When Bert said it was his father's military flag, tears instantly welled up in Grandpa's eyes. He returned the flag to Bert and then gave Joey back without taking any money. War took everything from everyone. He knows the pain of losing loved ones and possessions. That's why he doesn't want to be the one who takes away what rightfully belongs to Bert, Joey.
That is, of course, what my little girl would have wanted. And she was the boss.
As Grandpa was leaving, Bert couldn't help but ask for his granddaughter's name. And Emily, a name as kind and beautiful as an angel, this moment will forever be etched in Bert's mind. Soon, Bert embarked on his journey home. Alone with his horse, under the setting sun, Bert returned to his hometown. He came back to a home filled with memories and the warm embrace of his family. Joey also returned to the place he had long missed. Joey is a highly intelligent and spirited horse. No matter what its master Bert taught it, it could quickly grasp. But due to financial difficulties, Bert's father had to sell it to a captain. Thus, Joey became a war horse serving the country. During the chaotic 4 years of World War I, Joey was forced to move between the British and German armies, experiencing the brutality and bloodshed of war firsthand, and witnessing countless separations and deaths. But in the relentless years of war, it also felt the softness and brilliance of humanity. To save it from the barbed wire, the two opposing armies, who were once at each other's throats, put down their weapons and picked up pliers to rescue it. In a harmonious atmosphere, they completed the rescue mission together. As a result, Joey not only survived the no man's land but also returned to his owner, Bert. War often magnifies the evil within people. It can make people more ruthless and even cruel, but it can also inspire the good in humanity. It gives people the courage to protect the weak and use faint starlight to illuminate the depths of human nature. In fact, each of us is a complex and multifaceted being, like a painting interwoven with light and shadow. We are both embodiments of angels with kindness and innocence, and we cannot deny the selfish and greedy demons within us. These demons appear and disappear, influencing our choices and actions. This is not a complete denial of humanity, but a profound insight into the essence of life. True kindness is not without flaws. It lies in how we choose to uphold goodness and integrity in the face of temptation and adversity. True evil is not entirely irredeemable, as everyone can be illuminated by the light of love and hope at some moment, becoming an angel in someone. Therefore, in the face of uncontrollable human nature, we should maintain a humble and introspective heart, constantly reminding ourselves that while we may be a momentary devil in someone's life, we should also strive to be a warm angel in that instant. In a world intertwined with good and evil, find your own balance and harmony, allowing your soul to shine with the most genuine and moving brilliance amidst the interplay of light and shadow.